The sun in Ravenwood, Arizona didn't just shine, it burned. It scorched the cracked asphalt roads. It baked the sand into something that felt like walking on hot coals. It turned the air itself into something thick and heavy, something that pressed down on your chest and dared you to breathe. It was the kind of July afternoon where even the lizards stayed in the shade. And yet, through that brutal, merciless heat, a tiny figure was walking, alone. She was 5 years old, barely reaching the height of a mailbox. Her name was Lily Carter, and she wore a small yellow sundress that had once been bright and cheerful, but was now soaked through with sweat and dust. Her soft brown curls were matted against her face. Her cheeks were streaked with dried tears and dirt. And her feet. She had no shoes. She had walked nearly 3 miles across blistering Arizona pavement with bare feet, and they were bleeding, torn open by gravel, scorching ground, and cracked asphalt. Every single step she took left a small red mark behind her, like a trail of silent screams that no one could hear. But she didn't stop, because Lily Carter was not walking for herself. She was walking for her brother. In her arms, she clutched a worn stuffed bunny, one ear nearly falling off, button eyes scratched and dull. His name was Mr. Buttons, and he had been Noah's before he became hers. She held him so tightly his remaining button eye pressed into her skin, leaving a small circle in her skin. Noah gave me Mr. Buttons, she kept thinking with every painful step. Noah said Mr. Buttons would keep me safe. Noah needs me. I have to find help. She didn't know the name of the place she was walking toward. She had only seen it once before from the back seat of her mother's car, a large building set back from the road, with motorcycles lined up like sleeping iron giants, and a sign her mother had quickly looked away from. Her mother had whispered, "Don't look at those people, baby."
But Lily had looked. And now, as she pushed open that heavy chain-link gate with both trembling hands, with the very last ounce of strength in her tiny, broken body, she walked into the one place her mother had always told her to fear. She walked into the Road Saints MC clubhouse. Marcus Hayes had buried 2 of his brothers. Not biological brothers, though in every way that mattered they were. He had held Diego's hand when he bled out on a highway outside Tucson. He had carried what was left of Remy's dignity back to his family after a wreck outside Phoenix. He was 44 years old, 6'3", 230 pounds of weathered muscle, scarred hands, and a beard shot through with silver. On his back, he wore a leather vest with a patch that read, "Road Saints MC, President." The men called him Bear. Not because of his size, though that was part of it. They called him Bear because of the way he protected what was his. A bear doesn't look for trouble. A bear doesn't hunger for chaos. But cross a bear's family, touch what a bear loves, and there is no door, no wall, no law, no badge in this world that will save you. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Bear was sitting at the long wooden table in the clubhouse with a cup of black coffee and a pile of paperwork he'd been avoiding for 3 days. Around him, a dozen of his men were doing what the Road Saints did on quiet afternoons, playing cards, working on bikes, arguing about last night's baseball game. The screen door to the yard creaked. Nobody paid attention at first. Wind did that sometimes. But then, Tiny, who was, despite his name, 300 pounds of pure instinct, stood up slowly from his card game, his brow furrowed. "Bear?" Marcus looked up. Standing in the doorway of their clubhouse, swaying slightly like she might fall, was a little girl. She looked like something out of a nightmare, sweat-soaked, dust-covered, her tiny feet leaving faint red smudges on the concrete floor with every step. Her eyes, large, dark brown, glassy with exhaustion, swept across the room full of bearded, tattooed, leather-vested bikers, without a single flicker of fear. She had walked too far and hurt too much to have any fear left. Her eyes found Marcus. She crossed the room to him,
slowly, painfully, every step clearly costing her something, and stopped directly in front of him. He set down his coffee cup. She looked up at him with those enormous, exhausted eyes, and in a voice barely above a whisper, cracked and raw from crying and heat, she said, "Please, mister, my brother Noah is locked in a dark basement. The bad man has him. Nobody will help us because the bad man is the sheriff." Then her legs gave out. Marcus caught her before she hit the floor. For exactly 4 seconds, the entire clubhouse was silent. 40 combined years of hard riding, bar fights, courtrooms, and back road confrontations, and every single man in that room went completely still. Then, Tiny said, very quietly, she said, "The sheriff." Marcus was already kneeling on the floor, the little girl half in his arms. He was checking her feet, wincing visibly at what he saw, and reaching for the medical kit behind the bar without looking up. "How long has your brother been there, sweetheart?" he asked. His voice had gone soft. Not birthday party soft, the soft of someone who understood that this child had already lived through something terrible. Lily blinked. She was fighting to stay conscious. 4 days, she whispered. "Mama tried to call the police, but the police is him, Sheriff Kane. He took Noah because Mama saw something she wasn't supposed to see." A pause, a swallow. "He said if Mama called anyone, he'd hurt Noah worse." Marcus looked up slowly. Across the table, his vice president, a lean, quiet man named Cole, who had once been a military intelligence officer before the war broke something in him, met his eyes. "Sheriff Robert Kane?" Cole said. Not a question, a confirmation. Robert Kane, 18 years serving Ravenwood, his photo on the wall of every government building in town. The man who had shaken the governor's hand, given the high school commencement speech last spring, organized the Thanksgiving food drive every year, and smiled for every camera ever pointed at him. The most trusted man in Ravenwood, who had an 8-year-old boy tied up in his basement. "She walked 3 miles, Tiny said, his voice dangerously quiet, his eyes fixed on Lily's feet. "Barefoot, in this heat." He paused. "Bare. She's 5 years old." Something cracked open in Marcus Hayes' chest right then, something he hadn't felt crack in years. He finished wrapping Lily's feet in clean gauze. He stood up slowly. He looked around the room. Every man was already looking back at him. "Call everyone," he said. "Every chapter within 2 hours. Every brother who can ride." Cole was already on his phone. "Someone get Doc Rivera here first," Marcus added. "I want her checked before we move." "And Kane?" Tiny asked. Marcus picked up his coffee cup, set it down, reached for his leather vest. "Kane," he said quietly, "is about to learn what happens when you make a 5-year-old girl walk 3 miles in the Arizona heat to find justice." Within 40 minutes, Doc Rivera, a retired ER physician who had patched up road saints for 15 years, had examined Lily from head to toe. Dehydrated, mild heat exhaustion, second-degree burns on both feet, a deep cut on her left heel that needed 3 stitches. While Doc worked, Lily had grabbed Marcus's rough, scarred hand and held it with both of hers. She didn't let go the entire time. He didn't pull away. Within an hour, the sound started. It began as a low rumble at the edge of hearing, something you felt in your chest before your ears registered it. Then it grew and grew and grew. 93 motorcycles rolled into Ravenwood that afternoon. They came from 3 chapters. They came from highways and back roads and small towns up to 2 hours away. They came because Marcus Hayes had made one phone call and said 4 words: "A child needs us." No one asked questions. No one said they were busy. They came. And when those 93 bikes lined up 2 by 2 on Creston Avenue, the wide tree-lined street where Sheriff Robert Kane lived in his beautiful 4-bedroom suburban home, the sound was like thunder that didn't stop. Neighbors came to their windows. A mail carrier froze in the middle of the street. Someone's sprinkler was running, and the sound of it seemed absurd, almost comical against the roar. Marcus rode at the front. Behind him, 92 men and women who had answered a call. They stopped. The engines died. And for one long, heavy moment, the street was absolutely silent. Then Marcus Hayes climbed off his bike, walked to the front door of Kane's house, and knocked. Sheriff Robert Kane was not a man who scared easily. He had interrogated hardened criminals. He had stared down men who wanted him dead. He had navigated corruption, cover-ups, and consequences for 18 years with the calm confidence of someone who believed, truly believed, that he was untouchable. He opened his front door in khaki pants and a white polo shirt, a glass of lemonade in his hand, and the practiced smile of a man who had spent 2 decades performing trustworthiness. The smile lasted exactly 1 second. Then he saw them. 93 bikers standing in absolute silence on his street, and at the front, one very large, very calm man with silver in his beard and eyes that held no anger, only something far more dangerous than anger: certainty. "Marcus Hayes," Kane said. His voice was steady. He was good. "What's this about?" "You know what it's about, Robert," Marcus said quietly. "I don't know what you think you... There's a boy in your basement. His name is Noah Carter. He's 8 years old. He's been there for 4 days. Kane's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation. You'd better be very careful. His 5-year-old sister walked 3 miles through the Arizona heat on bare feet to find help. She's at my clubhouse right now with stitches in her foot and burns on her skin. She told us everything, Robert. Everything." Something shifted behind Kane's eyes. The smile was completely gone now. "You have 2 choices," Marcus said. "Open that basement door yourself, or we open this conversation with every law enforcement agency above your pay grade while 93 witnesses stand right here on this public street." Cole was already on the phone, had been since they parked. State police, county sheriff's office, the FBI field office in Phoenix. Every call had been made before they knocked on the door. This was not vigilante justice. This was a rescue, conducted in the full, bright light of accountability. Kane looked at the street behind Marcus. He looked at 92 faces that were not moving, not threatening, not giving him anything to grab onto legally, just standing there, witnessing. His shoulders dropped by half an inch. It was barely visible, but Marcus saw it. "The basement," Kane said. His voice had changed completely. All the polish, all the practiced warmth, gone. What was left was flat, hollow. The voice of a man who had just watched 18 years collapse in under 3 minutes. He turned and walked inside. Marcus followed. The basement stairs were behind the kitchen. Marcus went down first, alone, while Cole stayed at the top with Kane. The air changed as he descended, cooler, stale, with the particular smell of a closed room that hasn't seen sunlight in days. He found Noah Carter in the far corner. The boy was 8 years old, small for his age, with his sister's same dark brown eyes. He had been secured to a metal support pole with zip ties around his wrists, tight enough to leave marks, not tight enough to cut off circulation. Kane had been careful in his terrible, calculated way, careful enough to maintain just enough plausible deniability. A folding cot, a bucket, a case of water bottles, the bare minimum to keep a child alive. Noah looked up when the light hit him. He flinched. "Hey," Marcus said, very quietly, kneeling down so he wasn't towering over the boy. He kept his hands visible, his voice as soft as he could make it. "Hey, buddy. My name is Marcus. Your sister Lily sent me." The boy went very still.
"Lily?" he whispered. "She walked all the way to find help," Marcus said. "She's safe. She's waiting for you. Can I get you out of here?" Noah Carter stared at him for a long moment, this large, bearded, leather-vested stranger in his nightmare basement. And then, slowly, his chin crumpled, his eyes filled. "She walked," he said. "She actually walked?" 3 miles, Marcus said, barefoot. Noah broke. He cried the way 8-year-old boys cry when they've been holding it together for 4 days in the dark, completely, without restraint, with his whole body. Marcus produced a pocket knife, cut through the zip ties, and pulled the boy into a careful embrace without a word. He held him until the crying slowed. Then he carried him up the stairs and into the light. When Marcus walked out of Sheriff Robert Kane's front door carrying Noah Carter, something happened on Creston Avenue that no one who was there would ever fully be able to describe. 92 bikers, men and women who had collectively seen war, loss, poverty, addiction, grief, and the hardest edges of human experience, went silent in a way that was different from before. Before had been the silence of resolve. This was the silence of something being healed. Noah blinked in the bright afternoon sun. He looked at the sea of leather vests and motorcycles and weathered faces. He should have been terrified. Any child would have been. Instead, he looked at Marcus. "Are these your friends?" he asked. "They're your friends too," Marcus said. "Today, they're all your friends." 2 police cruisers from the state police arrived 7 minutes later. Cole had timed it perfectly. Enough time for the rescue to be complete, not enough time for Kane to make it complicated. Robert Kane walked out of his own front door in handcuffs, past 93 witnesses, past his neighbors watching from windows, past his perfectly maintained lawn and his American flag and the life he had built on the bones of his deception.
He didn't look up. Marcus didn't watch him go. He was already calling ahead to the clubhouse. They brought Noah to the Road Saints clubhouse in a truck. Doc Rivera insisted, no motorcycle, not today. Lily was sitting on the long couch inside, her bandaged feet propped up on a pillow, Mr. Buttons in her lap. Someone had found a clean t-shirt for her to change into. Someone else had brought her apple juice and crackers, which sat mostly untouched on the table beside her because she had not been able to eat. She had been watching the door for 45 minutes. When it opened and she saw her brother, alive, upright, blinking in the light, she didn't make a sound at first. She just stared, like she needed a moment to confirm that what she was seeing was real and not another one of the wishes she'd been making since the night they took him. Then Noah saw her. Lily! She was off the couch before Doc Rivera could stop her, bandaged feet and all, crossing the room at a dead run, and she hit her brother so hard they both nearly fell over. He grabbed her and held on. She buried her face in his shoulder and finally let herself cry. Not the careful, purposeful tears of a child on a mission, the full, released, shaking sobs of a 5-year-old girl who had been terrified for 4 days and had carried it all alone and could now, at last, put it down. Noah held her and cried too. Every single person in that room looked somewhere else for a moment. Marcus Hayes walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot for a long time. His jaw was tight. His eyes were bright. Tiny went to the bathroom and didn't come back for several minutes. Cole stepped outside. When Marcus turned back around, Lily had pulled back from her brother just far enough to hold up Mr. Buttons. "I kept him safe," she told Noah very seriously, "like you told me to." Noah laughed. It was a broken, wet, beautiful sound. He took Mr. Buttons gently and tucked him under one arm. Then he looked around at the room full of bikers, at Marcus, at Tiny, at Cole, at all of them, with the wide, clear eyes of a child who has not yet learned to disguise what he feels. "Thank you," he said, "for helping my sister." Marcus crossed the room and crouched down to the boy's level. "Your sister," he said carefully, "didn't need much help. She did the hard part herself." He paused. "You raised a brave one there, kid." Noah looked at Lily. Lily looked at Noah, and Lily, 5 years old, burned feet, tear-streaked face, straightened up very slightly, the way people do when they're told something true about themselves for the first time. The investigation that followed shook Ravenwood to its foundation. Robert Kane had not acted alone. Over 18 years, he had built a quiet empire of silence, officers who looked the other way, officials who asked no questions, paperwork that disappeared. He had used his badge not as a shield for the vulnerable, but as a weapon against anyone who threatened his carefully constructed world. Sarah Carter, the children's mother, had witnessed him accepting a bribe from a local developer, photographed on her phone by accident. That photograph had been enough to make him desperate. Desperate enough to cross a line no one had believed he was capable of crossing. He had been wrong about many things, but the most catastrophic miscalculation of Robert Kane's life was this: he had underestimated a 5-year-old girl. The charges were numerous. The conviction, when it came months later, was complete. But Ravenwood had a harder reckoning ahead, the kind that can't be resolved in a courtroom. The town had to look at itself and ask, how did we not know? How did we let a man's image become more important than the truth behind it? How many times did we look the other way because looking directly was uncomfortable? Those questions didn't have easy answers, but they were, at last, being asked. Robert Hayes never sought credit.
The Road Saints didn't hold a press conference. They didn't pose for photographs with the children. When a local news station came to the clubhouse, Marcus met the reporter outside, said simply that they had responded to someone who needed help and that any person with a conscience would have done the same. People see leather vests in motorcycles, he said, and they decide what kind of men we are before we open our mouths. That's their right. But those children needed someone, and we were there. That's the whole story. It wasn't the whole story, of course. It never is. The whole story included Tiny, who had quietly paid Noah's medical bill, Cole, who had connected Sarah Carter with a lawyer to help her rebuild after everything she'd lost, 3 other club members who had organized the collection among chapters to help the family find new housing, somewhere far from Ravenwood, somewhere they could begin again. None of it was announced. None of it was photographed. That was perhaps the most important part. Sarah Carter came to the clubhouse one evening, 3 weeks later. She was a small woman with her daughter's eyes and her son's careful, watchful way of taking in a room. She had a casserole dish in her hands and a look on her face that people get when words have failed them completely and they're trying to express something through the only language that still works. Marcus accepted the casserole. He introduced her to the men. He made her coffee. She sat at that long wooden table where decisions had been made and losses mourned, and ordinary Tuesday afternoons had been interrupted by extraordinary things, and she said, simply, "I don't know how to thank you." Marcus wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "Your daughter did something I've never seen an adult do," he said quietly. She looked at an impossible situation, and she refused to accept that no help existed. She just kept walking until she found some. He paused. "Raise her right. She's already halfway there." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. "Why did you help us?" she asked. "You didn't know us. It wasn't your problem." Marcus considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because she came to our door," he said finally. "And in this club, when someone comes to your door bleeding and asking for help, you don't ask if it's your problem. You just help." Lily Carter grew up. She grew up knowing the story of the day she walked 3 miles barefoot in the Arizona heat because she had no other choice. Not as a trauma. Her mother and the kind people around her made sure of that, but as a fact about herself, a thing she had done, a thing that was true. She kept Mr. Buttons for years, long past the age when most children give up their stuffed animals. He sat on her bookshelf, re-eared twice, button eyes replaced once, watching over her room. Noah healed. Children, when surrounded by love and consistency, have an extraordinary capacity to heal. And the Road Saints MC continued to ride the highways of Arizona, leather-vested, loud, occasionally misunderstood. But in Ravenwood, people remembered. They remembered 93 motorcycles lining up in silence on a suburban street. They remembered a large man with silver in his beard, carrying a boy up from the darkness and into the light. They remembered that help had come not from the expected direction, but from the unexpected one. Not from the badge, but from the road. And they remembered a little girl in a yellow sundress, clutching a one-eared bunny, walking through impossible heat on bleeding feet.
because she refused to believe that no help existed, because she kept walking until she found some. Sometimes the bravest person in the room is the smallest one. Sometimes justice rides on two wheels, and sometimes, just sometimes, a 5-year-old girl changes everything. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. Paths of honor. Real stories, real courage, real humanity. If this story moved you, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear that help exists, even when it seems impossible to find. Like, comment, and subscribe to Paths of Honor for more stories that remind us what people are truly capable of.